The Galactic Institute for Apex Studies was, by any measure, an imposing structure. It was carved from a single, obsidian-hued asteroid, its spires and buttresses jutting out into the void like the bones of some long-dead celestial leviathan. Inside, the corridors were sterile, silent, and maintained at a precise temperature that was comfortable for exactly none of the species who worked there, but was mathematically the most efficient compromise. It was a place of serious thought, a cathedral dedicated to the study of the galaxy's most dominant and dangerous life forms, from the crystalline thought predators of the Cygnus Veil to the brutish, crag-hided behemoths of the Hydron core. And at the heart of this institute, in the primary observation chamber, stood two of its most esteemed researchers, staring through a triple-paned wall of transparent hyperdiamond at the jewel of their collection. Thar, of the Groll, was a creature built for conquest. He stood a full 3 meters tall, his body a mosaic of interlocking stony plates that resembled granite. His species communicated through grinding tectonic shifts in these plates, but for the sake of interspecies decorum, he used a vocalizer that translated the deep rumbles into a gravelly, imperious baritone. To him, the universe was a simple equation. Strength was the numerator, everything else was the denominator. His companion, Xylos, was his physical and philosophical opposite. A Xylochian, he was a slender, willowy being whose 3-jointed limbs moved with a liquid grace. His large, multifaceted eyes blinked out of sync, a visible sign of the 3 independent lobes of his brain processing data in parallel. He saw the universe not as a battlefield, but as a grand, intricate data set waiting to be collated and understood. Strength was a crude variable, easily rendered obsolete by superior intellect and technology. The specimen's biorhythms remain elevated, Xylos stated, his voice a series of perfectly modulated chimes. Tricyclic adrenaline analogs are saturating its bloodstream at a rate 27% above optimal baseline. It is agitated. It is a predator, Thar rumbled, his body shifting in a way that suggested a contemptuous shrug. Agitation is its natural state. It feels the weakness of its confinement. It yearns to test its strength against a worthy foe. He flexed his own 4-fingered, stone-tipped hands. A yearning I comprehend. The specimen in question was a gloom fawn from the toxic murk of planet Nocturne 6. It was a creature of nightmare given form, a sleek, pantherine beast whose hide was the color of a starless midnight, seeming to drink the very light from the enclosure. It was all corded muscle, serrated claws that could shear through ship hull plating, and a mouth filled with teeth that looked like shards of obsidian. But its most terrifying feature was its psychic aura, a low-frequency broadcast of pure, predatory intent that could paralyze lesser species with primal fear. Even through the hyperdiamond and the psionic baffles, the two researchers could feel the ghost of it, a cold prickle at the base of their respective consciousnesses. This creature was the undisputed pinnacle of natural evolution in at least 3 quadrants. It was the yardstick against which all other predators were measured, and it was why they were here today, awaiting the arrival of a very peculiar guest. The transport has docked, Xylos announced, consulting a floating data slate. The human is aboard. He said the word human with the same clinical distaste one might use for mold or unidentified sludge. Thar made a low grinding sound, the Groll equivalent of a snort. Why the Grand Chancellor insisted on this farce is beyond my comprehension. A cultural exchange? What culture can a prey species offer? Recipes for being eaten more efficiently. This was the universal, undisputed truth about humanity. They were a joke, a biological oddity that had somehow stumbled its way into space despite possessing no natural advantages whatsoever. No claws, no fangs, no carapace, no venom, no innate psionic abilities. They were soft, squishy bipeds with a laughable lack of physical prowess and a ridiculously narrow tolerance for environmental variations. Their homeworld, Earth, was known from preliminary scans to be a chaotic, unstable mess of tectonic volatility and extreme weather, and the galactic consensus was that humans had only survived by being too pathetic for any real predator to bother with. They were the bottom of the food chain, cosmic plankton. The official reasoning is to foster interspecies understanding, Xylos chimed, though his tone conveyed his agreement with Kthar's assessment. The human, one Jake, is apparently an educator of their young. A teacher, the Chancellor believes this primitive role gives him a unique insight into developmental psychology. The psychology of what? Hiding? Scurrying. Kthar's vocalizer boomed with derision. He will look upon the Gloomfang, and his fragile primate mind will liquefy. It will be a short, and ultimately pointless, visit. The door to the observation chamber hissed open, and in walked Jake. He was aggressively average. He stood at a height that was unimpressive to nearly every species on the station. He was dressed in soft, beige-colored fabrics that looked about as durable as dried leaves. He had a thatch of unremarkable brown hair, and his face was equipped with the standard-issue human sensory organs, 2 forward-facing eyes, a central protuberance for olfaction, and a mouth that was currently arranged in a mild, pleasant smile. He carried a small, soft-sided case. He looked less like a representative of a starfaring species and more like someone who had gotten hopelessly lost on his way to a mid-level accounting seminar. "Kthar? Xylos?" he asked, his voice calm and even. "Jake, it's a real pleasure to be here. Wow, you really spared no expense on this place, huh? Very minimalist. Very clean." Xylos glided forward, his movements a study in condescending elegance. "Greetings, human Jake. We are your designated hosts. Welcome to the Institute. We trust your journey was not overly stressful for your species' delicate sensibilities." "Oh, no, it was fine," Jake said cheerfully. "The inertial dampeners on your ships are top-notch. A little smoother than the rush-hour traffic on the I-5, that's for sure." The 2 aliens exchanged a look of profound confusion. What was an I-5? Some sort of planetary migration route. A seismic fault line he had to navigate? The reference was meaningless, and therefore primitive. Kthar stepped forward, his immense form eclipsing the sterile lighting. He peered down at the small, soft creature. "You are small," he rumbled, stating the obvious as if it were a profound universal truth. "Your integument is soft. I detect no bioarmor, no natural weapons. Your pheromonal output indicates a complete lack of territorial aggression. You are a prey animal." Jake just blinked, his smile not wavering in the slightest. "Well, you're not wrong about the soft part. I got a nasty paper cut just this morning. Stung like you wouldn't believe. And you're a big fella, aren't you? What's your species record for bench pressing? Gotta be impressive." Kthar did not know what bench pressing was, but the human's complete lack of fear was peculiar. Not just a lack of fear, but a lack of any acknowledgement of the threat Kthar represented. It was like a field mouse complimenting a hawk on its plumage. It was absurd. It was illogical. "This," Xylos interjected, gesturing with a slender limb toward the hyperdiamond window, "is the subject of our primary study. Specimen 734. The Gloomfang of Nocturne 6-inch. Jake ambled over to the window, peering in. The Gloomfang, which had been pacing restlessly, stopped. It turned its head, its 6, pupil-less yellow eyes fixing on the strange new creature outside its enclosure. A low growl, like the sound of grinding worlds, echoed through the chamber, vibrating in the floor plates. The psychic pressure in the room spiked, a wave of pure malice and hunger that made Xylos's antennae twitch and Kthar's stone plates grind together instinctively. Jake leaned closer to the glass, a thoughtful expression on his face. He tilted his head. "Huh," he said, his voice casual. "Look at that. He's beautiful, in a please don't maul me sort of way. Big kitty." Kthar and Xylos were momentarily speechless. Big kitty. This was a being that had annihilated entire ecosystems. A creature whose psychic scream could induce catatonic terror in a squadron of battle-hardened Groll warriors. And this soft, weak, prey animal was comparing it to a domestic pest. "Human Jake," Xylos said, his chimes a little strained. "You do not comprehend. This is a class 10 hypercarnivore, an apex predator of the highest order. Its psychic emanations alone should be causing you significant distress." "Oh, is that what that is?" Jake asked, tapping a finger against his temple. "Feels a bit like a tension headache. I get those when my 5-year-olds miss their nap time. You get 20 of them screaming at you at the same time because someone stole the red crayon, and you'll know what a real psychic attack feels like." He turned away from the window. "So, what's on the agenda? You guys want to grab a coffee? Or whatever it is you drink? I brought my own tea bags, just in case." The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the situation was beginning to cause logical feedback loops in Xylos's three brains. This human was not processing reality correctly. He was broken, a flawed specimen. Kthar, on the other hand, was simply deciding that the human was too stupid to be afraid. That had to be the only explanation. It was at that precise moment that a piercing klaxon began to blare. Red lights strobed across the sterile white walls, bathing the observation chamber in a pulsating, hellish glow. Warning, a synthesized voice announced from the ceiling emitters. Containment field fluctuation in enclosure gamma. Psionic baffles operating at 62% efficiency and falling. Outer perimeter integrity compromised. Xylos zipped to a control console, his slender fingers flying across the holographic interface. Impossible. The energy regulators are failing. The Glumfang's psychic output is increasing exponentially. It's deliberately overloading the system. Inside the enclosure, the Glumfang was no longer pacing. It stood perfectly still, its head lowered, its entire body vibrating with a terrifying, resonant hum. The air around it began to shimmer and distort. The psychic pressure in the observation room was no longer a subtle prickle. It was a physical force, a crushing weight of pure dread and bloodlust that made it hard to breathe. Kthar let out a rumbling battle cry. The beast seeks true combat. At last, I shall meet its challenge. He slammed a fist into a wall panel, which slid open to reveal a rack of vicious-looking Groll combat implements. He hefted a massive war maul made of some dark, heavy metal. Brute force is irrelevant. Xylos shrieked, his usual composure shattered. His chimes were now a frantic, discordant mess. The field is collapsing. We must reroute auxiliary power and initiate a level 4 stasis pulse. But the psychic interference is corrupting my commands. The hyperdiamond window began to crack. Not with a single fracture, but with 1,000 tiny, crystalline spiderwebs spreading from the center. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the very structure of the material began to fail. Panic had taken hold. The two greatest minds on the station, the warrior and the intellectual, were reverting to their most basic, unthinking instincts, fight or flight. And then, a calm voice cut through the chaos. Hey, fellas, take it easy. Both aliens turned to stare at Jake. The human hadn't moved. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, with an expression of mild annoyance, like someone whose favorite television show had been interrupted by a power outage. He was looking at the terrified, rampaging apex predator on the other side of the failing glass with a look of profound disappointment. Honestly, Jake sighed, shaking his head. This is just embarrassing. Is this how you handle a simple tantrum? Kthar lowered his war maul a few inches, his warrior's rage momentarily short-circuited by sheer bewilderment. Tantrum? This is not a tantrum. This is the righteous fury of a supreme predator. No, it's a tantrum, Jake said with absolute certainty. He walked over to the main console, ignoring Xylos's frantic manipulations. Look at him. He's bored. He's been cooped up in this sterile little box, and you've been poking and prodding him, and now he's acting out because he wants attention. He's pushing the boundaries to see what he can get away with. Classic toddler behavior. Xylos stopped typing, his three brains struggling to parse the human statement. Your analysis is foundationally illogical. You are anthropomorphizing a creature of pure instinct. It does not want attention, it wants to kill and consume. Same difference, Jake said dismissively. He looked at the rapidly degrading containment field readings. Okay, look, your way isn't working. How about we try mine? Can you override the main door lock to the enclosure? Just for, say, 30 seconds. The two aliens froze. The silence was broken only by the screaming klaxon and the ominous cracking of the hyperdiamond. You wish to enter the enclosure? Xylos asked, his voice barely a whisper. You would be torn asunder before your first neuron could register your own demise. Kthar roared. It is a glorious death, but a foolish one. Yeah, probably, Jake agreed easily. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. Look, you're about to have a 150-kilo ball of claws and psychic rage loose in your hallways. My way, you've only got one dead, squishy human to clean up if I'm wrong. It's just simple risk management. Now, are you going to open the door, or do I have to find a fire axe? He gestured toward an emergency equipment locker. Xylos and Kthar looked at each other. The logic, as insane as it was undeniable. The situation was already at maximum failure. The human's proposal introduced no new variables that weren't already imminent, except for the potential, however infinitesimal, for a different outcome. With a trembling limb, Xylos tapped a command into the console. "The inner door will cycle open on your command," he chimed, his voice resonating with the funereal finality of the act. "Your biosigns will be monitored. Farewell, human Jake." "Thanks," Jake said. He turned to face the door. He unzipped his soft-sided case and pulled out a small, red, rubber ball. He gave it a little squeak. Then he took a deep breath, like a man about to dive into a cold pool, and said, "Okay, open sesame." The thick plasteel door to the enclosure hissed open with a pneumatic sigh. The psychic pressure that flooded the observation room was staggering. It was like being hit by a physical wave of hatred. Kthar braced himself, his stone plates grinding. Xylos collapsed against the console, his systems overwhelmed. Jake just walked through the door. He stepped into the enclosure, and the door hissed shut behind him. For a moment, he was just a small, beige figure in a vast, white space, facing a creature born from the darkest recesses of the galactic imagination. The Gloomfang was now fully focused on him. Its hum intensified, the air around it visibly warping. The psychic assault it unleashed was a focused, targeted spear of terror, designed to shatter the mind of any sentient being, to reduce it to a gibbering, paralyzed wreck. Jake just stood there. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He met the creature's 6 burning yellow eyes with a calm, steady gaze. He held up the little red ball. "Okay, big guy," Jake said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the suddenly silent enclosure. "I know you're upset. I get it. It's boring in here. No enrichment. No stimulation. That's not good for a growing boy, is it?" The Gloomfang paused. Its psychic onslaught wavered for a nanosecond. This was not the reaction it expected. It expected screaming. It expected terror. It expected a mind to break and a body to fall. It did not expect conversation. It did not expect a complete and utter lack of fear. It was like roaring at a mountain. The mountain doesn't care. Jake took a slow, deliberate step forward. He didn't crouch or make himself smaller, as prey would. He didn't puff himself up or roar, as a challenger would. He just walked, calmly, confidently, like he belonged there. "We're not going to break things, though," Jake continued, his tone shifting. It was still quiet, but now it held a new quality. An edge of absolute, unshakable authority. The kind of voice a parent uses when a child is about to do something truly dangerous. The "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed" voice. That's not acceptable behavior. We don't scream and we don't throw things, and we certainly don't try to tear down the walls. Understand? He took another step. The Gloomfang actually took a half step back. Its head tilted in what could only be described as confusion. The psychic hum lessened, the aura of malice replaced by a dawning sense of uncertainty. This tiny, soft thing was not prey. It was not a threat. It was something else. Something its millennia of predatory instinct had no category for. It was projecting an aura not of fear or of aggression, but of control. In the observation room, Kthar and Xylos watched, their respective minds utterly blown. Kthar could feel it, even through the damaged baffles. The predator's confidence was breaking. The human wasn't fighting it on a physical level. He was dismantling its entire psychological framework. He was asserting dominance without a single act of aggression. It was the most terrifying thing Kthar had ever witnessed. "Now," Jake said, stopping about 10 feet from the creature. "I'm going to roll this ball. If you want to play, you can bring it back to me. If you don't, that's fine too. We can just stand here until you've calmed down. Your choice." He gently rolled the little red ball across the sterile white floor. It moved with a slight, wobbly path, making a soft, unassuming sound as it rolled. It came to a stop near the Gloomfang's massive, clawed forepaw. The great beast stared at the ball. It stared back at Jake. The 6 yellow eyes blinked for the first time. The crushing psychic aura was gone, replaced by a palpable sense of bewilderment. It looked at the ball again. It tentatively nudged it with its nose. The ball squeaked. The Gloomfang flinched back, then peered at it again, intrigued. After a long, tense moment, it gently picked up the ball in its massive jaws, careful not to puncture it with its razor-sharp teeth, and patted over to Jake. It dropped the squeaky red ball at his feet. Jake smiled. A genuine, warm smile. He reached out, slowly, and scratched the gloomfong behind one of its ridged, leathery ears. "Good boy," he said softly. "See? That wasn't so hard, was it?" The gloomfong leaned into the touch and let out a low, rumbling sound. It was not a growl. It was a purr. The door hissed open, and Jake walked back into the observation room, leaving the now docile apex predator batting the red ball around its enclosure like an overgrown house cat. He dusted off his hands and turned to the two petrified aliens. "Right," he said cheerfully. "Now that that's sorted, who's for tea?" Thar and Xylos did not answer. They couldn't. They were staring at him as if he had just calmly rearranged the fundamental laws of physics. Thar's Warmall had slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. Xylos's three brains had, for the first time in his existence, synchronized into a single, unified state of catatonic shock. It was Xylos who spoke first, his voice a barely audible series of discordant chimes. "What? What are you?" Jake picked up his soft-sided case and retrieved a small, white pouch attached to a string. "I'm a kindergarten teacher," he said, as if that explained everything. It didn't. Not even close. "That is not an explanation," Thar finally roared, his voice a mixture of awe and existential terror. "You faced the gloomfong. You faced the concentrated psychic embodiment of predatory rage, and you scolded it. You tamed it with a toy. How? What manner of being can do such a thing?" Jake sighed and leaned against the console, looking at the two of them with an expression of profound patience. "Okay, look, you guys have it all wrong about my species. You look at us, you see no claws, no fangs, no armor. You see prey. You're not wrong, but you're not right, either. You're missing the context." He took a moment, as if trying to figure out how to explain calculus to a rock. "Where do you think we come from? This Earth you've scanned. You think it's some kind of paradise where we just popped into existence?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Our planet is a nonstop, full-contact demolition derby of lethality. You guys have apex predators. We have entire ecosystems designed from the ground up to kill you in 1,000 different, deeply unpleasant ways. You think your gloomfong is scary?" Jake continued, his voice taking on a lecturer's cadence. "We have creatures called grizzly bears. They don't have psychic powers, but they can weigh half a ton, run faster than our fastest sprinters, and they will literally eat you alive. And they're not even the scariest bears. We have polar bears that actively hunt us. We have tiny, brightly colored frogs whose skin can kill 10 adult males. We have snakes whose venom can liquefy your internal organs. We have spiders whose bites can cause flesh to rot off the bone. We have insects, billions of them, many of which carry diseases that have wiped out entire civilizations. Our oceans? Don't even get me started on our oceans. Everything in there is either trying to eat you, sting you, or just passively poison you for swimming too close." He paused, letting that sink in. Thar and Xylos were staring at him, their expressions a cosmic garage sale of anxiety. "You see this?" Jake said, holding up his soft, fleshy hands. "You see weakness. We see the hands that learned to nap flint into a spear sharp enough to kill a mammoth 10 times our size. You see our lack of armor? We see a body that learned to shed heat, to run, and run, and run, until our prey, bigger, stronger, and faster than us, collapsed from sheer exhaustion. We didn't evolve to win the first 10 seconds of a fight. We evolved to win the last 10 hours. It's called persistence hunting. We just keep going. But the psychic power," Xylos stammered. "The sheer force of will." "Force of will." Jake laughed. "Let me tell you about force of will. I'm a kindergarten teacher. That means for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I am locked in a room with 24 5-year-old humans. Do you have any idea what a 5-year-old human is? It's a chaotic, illogical, emotionally volatile life form with the energy of a small star and the impulse control of a detonating bomb. They have no concept of long-term consequences. They will try to stick forks in electrical sockets. They will eat glue. They will scream at a pitch that can shatter glass just because their shoelace came untied." He leaned in closer, his eyes intense. "Your gloomfong projects an aura of predatory hunger. I've had a 5-year-old look me dead in the eye and tell me, with the cold, detached certainty of a dying son, that he will never, ever forgive me for giving the last blue piece of construction paper to another child. You want to talk about psychic damage? That's psychic damage. That's a grudge that will outlast empires. We didn't survive by being the strongest, Jake explained, his voice softening again. We survived by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and most importantly, the most empathetic. You see empathy as a weakness, a prey-like trait. We weaponized it. Empathy is the ultimate tool for psychological dominance. It's the ability to understand exactly what another being is thinking and feeling, to know what it fears, what it wants, what motivates it. I didn't see an apex predator in there. I saw a lonely, bored, frustrated creature that needed a different kind of stimulation. So I gave it to him. It's not that different from dealing with little Timmy when he throws his building blocks across the room because he's frustrated with his nap schedule. He stood up straight and shrugged. You guys put the Gloomfang on a pedestal. You treated it like a god of death, and it played the part. I treated it like a toddler having a tantrum, and it played that part, too. Turns out, the second one is a lot easier to manage. The silence that followed was heavier than a neutron star. Kthar looked at his own stone-like hands, which had crushed the skulls of his species' greatest enemies, and for the first time, they seemed crude, inadequate. He had spent his life honing his body for physical conflict, and this small, soft creature had won a battle with a quiet word and a rubber ball. Xylos was running trillions of calculations per second, his entire understanding of galactic sociology, xenobiology, and predator-prey dynamics crumbling into dust. Humans weren't prey. They weren't an anomaly. They were something else entirely. They were a species that had evolved in a crucible of such unrelenting, multifaceted horror that they had been forced to transcend the physical arms race altogether. They didn't need claws or fangs. Their minds were the weapon. Their entire civilization was the killing edge. They were the galaxy's tricksters, its madmen, its ultimate survivors. They were persistence predators, not of flesh, but of reality itself. They would just keep going, adapting, and talking, until the universe bent to their will. Your entire species, Xylos chimed faintly. Are they all like you? Jake chuckled. Me? Oh no. I'm one of the patient ones. You should meet the ones who go into politics. Or customer service. Those are the real psychic powerhouses. He glanced at a chronometer on the wall. Anyway, I've got to file my report. It was great meeting you both. And you're Big Kitty. He gave them a friendly wave and walked out of the observation chamber, leaving the two most respected minds in Apex studies standing amidst the wreckage of their worldview. They stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the faint, happy squeaking of the red ball from inside the enclosure. Xylos, Kthar rumbled, his voice low and profoundly shaken. Update the Galactic Threat Assessment Index. To what? Xylos whispered. What classification could possibly encompass that? Kthar looked at the data slate showing Jake's profile. Species, human. Occupation, educator of the young. He thought about the calm, absolute authority in the human's voice. He thought about the creature that had terrified him, now playing like a kid. He thought about an entire planet of beings who considered a room full of their own young to be a form of psychic warfare training. I do not know, Kthar admitted, a feeling utterly alien to him. Fear, settling deep within his stony core. Just put humanity at the top. And put a note. A note? Yes, Kthar said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, terrified whisper. The note should read, do not, under any circumstances, threaten their children.